Yeah, and I guess that's sort of the point I'm going with, is that expectations were, the bar was low for Microsoft coming to this print, it would seem, and maybe for Meta a little heightened. Rohit, I want to get your thoughts on that, specifically where Meta is concerned.
Yeah, I think the expectations for Meta were high, and they kept going higher. Google reported even before that. I think the high end of guide for Q4, that sets the benchmark for what the 25 growth algorithm could look like. I think what investors were looking for slightly more than that is what I think. For them to get very excited, absolutely nothing wrong with Meta. It is the one to own on weakness, but I think it's just the expectations mismatch between how the stock had run into earnings and what they are guiding towards. So I feel we should be the one to buying Meta tomorrow if there is lingering weakness into the year end.
Video discusses the recent earnings reports and market responses to major tech players like Microsoft, Meta, and AMD. Microsoft reported strong growth in Azure, exceeding market expectations due to AI-driven demand, which analysts see as a positive sign for the company's future in cloud computing. However, despite a home run quarter, Microsoft stock is only slightly up, suggesting investors may be waiting for more specific guidance. Meta also reported strong earnings, but concerns over increased capital expenditures led to a stock dip. While analysts view the dip as temporary and believe Meta is a buy on weakness, some investors had higher expectations for Meta's earnings, leading to a mismatch between stock momentum and guidance. The video also touches on AMD's position in the AI and GPU space compared to Nvidia. Although AMD's growth is solid, it's still viewed as a secondary competitor to Nvidia, which continues to dominate the GPU market. The segment highlights investor concerns about AMD's ability to keep up with Nvidia's rapid technological advancements, which could limit AMD's near-term potential.
Dan, you're sitting on set with me. I'm gonna kick this off with you. 33% growth in Azure, which is what the company had forecasted coming into this, even though street expectations had come down and were lower than that coming into the print. Meta, on the other hand, strong report, but CapEx, is that what's pushing that stock lower right now?
Yeah, so for Microsoft, I'd call these home run quarter. I mean, in terms of Azure, in terms of what we saw in the cloud, fears that you're going to see some sort of slowdown. I mean, obviously you saw the strong Google numbers last night. Hyperscalers, you're just seeing this accelerate. It's all about the AI revolution. And on that Mount Rushmore, it's not just Jensen, it's Nadella. And I think this is just a huge flex of muscles for Microsoft. When it comes to Meta, stocks had a huge run. Talk about CapEx, they're going to continue to double down there. I think that is the smart move. Like, I think 24 hours from now, this is a stock that could be up. So I think there's actually the wrong reaction here. We'd be buyers here on Meta, but especially what we see on Microsoft.
There you go. I mean, if that doesn't tell the story, I don't know, Jason Snipe, what does. You know, you tell me, because you own Nvidia and you own Qualcomm, you don't own AMD. Right. That's not a very compelling story that you need to. I don't necessarily think. At all, Scott. I mean, obviously the price action tells a story without a doubt. And I think, you know, it was a light guide. It was a messy quarter. I mean, beat on the top and bottom, whatever. But the guidance wasn't great. And I think when you go back to ASML, you know, and their earnings, which were messy as well, and then you saw what happened with Taiwan Semi, which I know is Weiss's stock, which was blowout. It just goes to show you that there are a few companies that are really, really winning here. And Nvidia, like we always say, the Beltway and the interstate rides all the way through Nvidia, and I think that's why a lot of folks own it. Weiss?
I mean, let's call this for what it is, okay? You've got a stock that came into the quarter at 80 times trailing PE, which is almost a third higher than what Nvidia was. They don't have the same growth rate. They're still more expensive than Nvidia today, and they're more expensive next year. So what were people thinking? This is purely a momentum trade. I don't care how great a CEO Lisa Su is. I have no reason to believe she's not. I do respect her and like her, and this isn't her fault. Now, her fault may be catching the GPU wave a little late, right? But CPUs are still important. But the point is, it was asinine to own this stock at that valuation when you've got Nvidia selling at a lower valuation. They're both overpriced. I own Nvidia. But I don't know what went through people's minds, and we'll talk about maybe a healthcare company similarly positioned like this. It still makes no sense in AMD. Well,
let's get to two things. Let me ask you before I get to Meta then, since you brought up, you know, the beneficiaries of the spend. What's going on with AMD? You own that.
Yeah.
That stock's having a terrible day. It's trying to play catch up, I think is fair to say. What's your own view for somebody who actually owns the stock?
Yeah, so the debate internally is AMD, if you weren't looking at the results from Nvidia and others, is doing really quite well. It's growing nicely. The growth is reaccelerating. They upped their targets for their AI data center business. However, those expectations today are much lower than they were at the beginning of the year. And the expectations for next year are still lower than they were at the beginning of the year. In other words, AMD is expected to be a huge winner. Right now, it's a winner, but you've got other places that seem to be winning the battle there.
But I mean, as long as it's compared to Nvidia in the near term,
right,
that's the potential problem moving forward, right? It's a problem until it's not.
Correct.
But I mean, the outlook, when do you have an idea that you really think that AMD can be a viable competitor to Nvidia? Because that's what the market seems to only care about.
Well, one of the challenges that they have is NVIDIA itself is a tremendous competitor. So NVIDIA's next generation of chips is talking about leapfrogging again. And there's kind of a fear, like, frankly, AMD's seen it before long ago. Remember when it was a competitor to Intel but never really could gain market share? It lived in that sort of middle land for decades. So we'll see in the next year, I think, whether or not AMD can start to gain back share against NVIDIA. But for now, it remains sort of a second source supplier. And the fear is that NVIDIA, not only ramping up the technology, but improving supply, may sort of cap AMD's near-term opportunity.
I mean,
Dan, back to Microsoft. I mean, it's only about 1% higher. You said it was a home run. It's not at the highs for the years. What gives? Is this a signal that maybe stock move-wise it's out of gas, or are we just waiting for the guide and the color to decide how bullish investors should be?
I think it's waiting for that color, from Nadella. But I think what's really happened here is this is an Azure growth acceleration story. And I think investors were fearing that you were seeing some sort of slowdown. You look at that intelligent cloud, you look at the margins. I mean, this is a company firing on all cylinders. I believe ultimately we sit here 6-9 months from now, and this is a $4 trillion market cap. I think Apple and Nvidia get there first. But in terms of AI revolution, what we heard from Google, Microsoft, what we hear from Meta, it is still first, second inning of this AI revolution. And I think you get more and more confidence from the hyperscalers. But I think Microsoft, to me, is a table pounder here at this level.
Rohit, going to take a left turn real quick here and ask about DoorDash. We've got CFO Ravi Inakonda coming up in a bit. I think you're neutral on it. It beat on the top and bottom lines, guided higher than the street expected. Stock is off the lows here in overtime. Initially dropped about 5%. Now it's down about 1.5%. Plus, GAAP profitability. They say that they're gaining ground market share-wise, and they've got this partnership with Lyft that I guess tries to take on Uber One. What more do they need to do?
Look, I think they are in a spot where they have the core market, which is the best and the most profitable market. Every new thing they touch, be it grocery, be it overseas restaurants, or any new growth, there is already competition there, and profitability in those new growth areas is going to be structurally lower. So that's the worry we have with DoorDash. It's a market leader in US restaurants, but in everything else they touch, their profitability is going to be slightly lower and lower and lower as the days go by. GAAP profitability is extremely important. It's probably the only $60 billion market cap company with the first quarter as a GAAP profitable being reported today. So again, I think valuation is a key concern for us, and I think what happens to this company next 12, 18 months as growth is going to be mid-teens and profitability longer term is not going to be as high as standalone mobility business like a Lyft or a global leader like Uber. So that's why we are neutral.
Okay, Rohit Kulkarni and Dan Ives.
So you recently added to Nvidia. When we have analysts talking about, the cost of catching up, it seems, as I said, implicit they're talking about Nvidia, the cost it's going to take to try and catch up, maybe not all the way to Nvidia, but at a place to be certainly more competitive.
Yeah, that's a tall order. I mean, so first of all, I think, Dr. Lisa Su is amazing, so I would never discount her. And actually the revenue guide was like 7.5 versus 7.54. And they even said plus or minus 300. So to me, it's just like sentiment was coming in wanting a big number. Obviously, the gaming was weak. But I do think that this whole catch-up trade, just in general, if you think about it, Nvidia is also cannibalizing themselves with creating faster, bigger GPUs like Blackwell. And there will be a point when these big cloud service providers go from training to inference, and then all of a sudden, do they need all that compute? And so I think this catch-up trade, I'm not so sure about that, because by the time they catch up, well, we need all of these chips or GPUs anyway. And so I think the market has sniffed this out. It's up, what, 2% for the year? Versus Nvidia's up, what, 160?
Barely.
And
well,
so
we're going to show you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. As you finish making your point, Brent. Excuse me for jumping in. We're trying to put together right now the stock by stock look year to date on AMD versus Nvidia. So excuse me, but continue as we throw that up.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, take AMD as its own company. They do different things. There is crossover, but as it relates to AI spend, the GPUs and Blackwells rests squarely with Nvidia. It's just like it is what it is. And so I just don't think that catch-up is actually sound mathematically.
The video provides insights into the recent earnings of Microsoft, Meta, and AMD, with a particular focus on how each company is positioned in the growing AI and cloud computing market. Microsoft's robust Azure growth exceeded expectations, signaling continued strength in the cloud space. Meanwhile, Meta's strong earnings were overshadowed by increased capital expenditure, creating short-term stock volatility. Analysts generally see both companies as well-positioned for future growth, with Microsoft leading in AI and Meta's spending seen as a strategic move. On the other hand, AMD's efforts to compete with Nvidia in the GPU market reflect challenges. While AMD is performing well, Nvidia's technological lead makes it difficult for AMD to capture significant market share in the near term. This raises questions about whether AMD can close the gap or if it will continue to play a supporting role in the industry. What do you think? Will AMD eventually rival Nvidia, or is Nvidia too far ahead? And do you agree with analysts that Microsoft's Azure growth and Meta's spending are wise investments for the future?